Okay. Oh my god, this fucking cold is savage. Yeah, not too savage to not make a video for you lot though. Hello everyone, Connor Whitmore here again with another video for you on the Nawtystep channel. A very ill Connor Whitmore at that. And it's time for another Extra Nawties monthly roundup, the first of the decade. Gonna go over some EPs, albums and compilations that I wasn't able to review in full, but which I still thought interesting enough to share my opinions on them with you. Shorter reviews as always because there is a lot to get through, identifying my main points with each one, and hopefully showing you a couple things that you hadn't heard of before, covering the whole of December and the end of November. And they're all covered in alphabetical order by way of artist or record label name, and are all linked in the description box down below. Lastly, there will be a small list of honourable mentions at the end of the video, ones that I couldn't talk about here because then there would just be too many, but I definitely recommend checking them out as well. And so, kicking off this latest installment, we have the new compilation album from Burial, Tunes 2011 to 2019. The decade just gone, Burial was still very much all about his really atmospheric, soundscapey vibe, dreamy vocal samples, a mix of eerie and blissful. A less emotional pull to his music though, I would have to say. Paints a picture still, but doesn't make you feel the gut-wrenching guilt of it. Not as subtle in its delivery. In a way, it feels more industrial and bleak without showing you the pain of it, if that makes sense. Intent on laying out the dark hopelessness more than anything, I would have to say, even though we do get a fair share of quite uplifting stuff here. Yeah, for the most part, I find it to be quite dark. Exceptions include Young Death and Come Down to Us, but for the most part the last decade didn't see his music reach quite far enough emotionally in terms of a comparison with his first two albums. Also a couple of bangers here, which I find interesting, thinking about Claustro, Rival Dealer, many other different sides to him as well. We touched on the more uplifting side that he delivers here, but yeah, those brighter ones I think I'll have to get used to, having enjoyed his darker stuff so much over the years. But yeah, I love he's still putting music out, first and foremost. Quite extensive tunes as well. We're talking about a lot of them being 10 minutes plus, which is quite something when you think about it. Each one having its journey, and it just leaves me wondering where he'll go from here. A third album this decade? Who knows, but we can but hope. Next up, we have Control Freak, someone whose style I've been enjoying more the more I've listened to it, I have to say, and this EP definitely builds on that admiration and then some. Originally, I found the Dr. Rosie comparisons to be pretty inescapable, but he's branched out well with time, a real bombastic quality to his music that is effective throughout here, I would have to say. Some of the sounds are still quite similar, but there's a much bigger range than before across the EP here. The delivery is impactful, brilliant vocal snippets, very aware of the placement of all of these little touches as well. And my inclination is to pick a favourite or standout here, but I don't think I have one. However, that is in a good way because I find them all to be of a certain high standard, especially considering that he is an up-and-comer after all. But yeah, what is this guy? 17, 18 years old? Honestly, if he's making stuff like this now and he keeps at it, then I fear for pretty much everyone else in the savage, heavy dubstep scene. After that, we have another one of the biggest up-and-comers in dubstep music at the moment, in my opinion, Cyclops. Keeps things interesting here with particular sounds in every track, the unpredictability of his music being perhaps its biggest selling point. No one tune here though that I feel is completely refined in terms of the relationship between different elements. There's a lot going on, but I think to deliver something great, it needs to cohere just a little more, needs to frame his tracks more around catchy ideas than sounds just jumping out at the listener per se. What I think would work really well for his music is having a few more motifs that you can just run with again and again in each respective song. Having said that, I do think encouraging going forward, energy and the sonic variety is very much there, just needs refining with the ideas and a bit of a punchier definition on his overall sound, beefier percussion in particular. Following on from there, we have Dirt Monkey. I've enjoyed his stuff a fair bit over the last couple of years, and this album goes some way to reinforcing that feeling, and reminding me of what I love his music most for. He keeps the colour, the wobbles, the liveliness, the fun, the exuberance, variety, things that by this point you feel he'll never lose, staple parts of his production. However, this LP I think is bereft of many great drop ideas, I would have to say, and in all honesty, pretty much all of them either have a good idea or good execution, never both. So as a result and overall it's quite weak sounding across the board. If I had to give exceptions at a push, I would say Bananas and Shrekstep. Yeah, brilliant title, has to be said, but even they get a bit annoying over time and over their course. I love the general approach here and Dirt Monkey's style overall, but the heavy aspect of it is just not for me. Then we have the new Enai EP, well cut, very well cut at that, but I take that to be a given with a producer of Enai's standing and stature within drum and bass music at the moment, definitely flying the flag very well on that front, but the ideas are just a bit plain and ordinary for me, nothing here really grabbing me or hooking me in quite every day, and not something that I'm massively eager to go back to really, I'd have to say. I've loved his material of the recent past, talking about the last couple of years or so, but it's been a while now that I've been really wowed. Little doubt though that he will peg it back at some point in the not too distant future. Next up, G Jones. Now the fact that this EP placed in my top EPs of the year video and only came out a couple of weeks ago, I think says it all really. And if you want a bit more detail on why exactly I enjoyed that project so much, I recommend checking out that video, which I shall link right here. Moving on from there, we have the 9th edition of the We Are Friends Mousetrap compilation. A classic label comp here in that there are a few standouts, but for the most part, it's a load of tunes that I'm not that big on. I do appreciate the range of styles and producers we get here though. All being said though, I think my favourites come from Deadmau5, a style I'm not sure we've seen from him yet, almost neuro-y. Also like the tracks from Ash, Donny Carr and the Julian Gray remix. Tunes from Kindred and Mason Ware were alright as well. After that we have Manu Man, who had one of my favourite albums of the year in Provenance and is now back with another stealthy project, an 8-track EP, and it follows on well, yet in an unexpected way. More down to earth and warmer, this collection, I think. A calming quality to it that wasn't as present in Provenance, very welcomed therefore as a contrast from the bite of that album. Almost lo-fi at points here, a down-tempo delivery for the most part, like something you may hear from Drevum or more trap-based up-and-comers like Leet, for example. But I mean, regardless of what style we actually get here, I really recommend it, either in itself or as a development in the Manu Man concept, if you've heard his earlier stuff. But yeah, the ending is also lovely, so yeah, overall a big recommend. Then we have the 4th installation in the Neosignal remix series. Haven't had one that I've enjoyed front to back yet, and this one is very much the same in perhaps the worst way so far. These are almost all very ordinary and straightforward, not a lot here taking me aback per se. A lot of execution is quite off as well. Some big names on show too, so overall quite disappointing. If there's one track I'm going to shout out, it's the Hybris remix. Some pretty interesting sounds in that one, I can't lie. The Caracal Project one was alright as well. After that, we have the Never Say Die VIPs. I thought I might do a full review of this, but I mean, the whole way it was set up, it just didn't feel like something to review as a whole collection, because it isn't even that. It isn't a whole thing in itself, a body of work in any way. Just seems like a load of tracks kind of thrown together. And to think that here we have the biggest label of a whole genre, no question. For me, they could have celebrated being in existence for 10 years in a better way. A more effective way, in my opinion. You'd hope it would be a celebration of the origins a bit more so. I mean, producers like Zomboy and Tramper aren't even involved here. Some VIPs are of songs that literally came out last year. I get you have certain schedules getting in the way, but I think commemorating the biggest label takes precedence over everything else, so yeah, that is my overriding feeling here. It feels like they realised it was 10 years a little bit too late and sort of threw something together a bit last minute. So yeah, overall feeling a bit weird about this release, if you can even call it that. But for what it's worth, my favourites came from Ivory and Marauder. The Must Die one and the Lax VIP of High From It were alright. However, a lot of them are very forgettable, boring, basic, predictable, underwhelming. I appreciate the range we get here of style and different producers on show, but overall, yeah, the feeling I get from it, whatever you want to call it, isn't great. Following on from there, now I must admit I didn't think much of the Trees before this EP, but now I'm fully on board. I get the hype. His style and approach is very effective for pretty much the whole thing here. It's sharp, intricate, deep dub sort of music, rounded in sound, which I think is quite a rare combination. Gets quite grisly and freeformy at points as well, which I think is extremely welcomed, of course. A jungly, tribal theme to it also, which lends a bit of extra atmosphere. The vocal samples and little touches in most tunes are very good as well. It's just very consciously put together. The fact of it being far better than I thought it would be, and actually liking it a fair bit in itself as well, means this is a big recommend from me from the last month. Next up we have Oski. Some of his best material here yet, I can't lie, for me anyway. First half of the EP in particular, the way it's cut just brings you right in. Pretty captivating, even though the music itself is quite contained. There are similar problems to before, moments that drag a bit, the production not all that sharp, the D&B tune most of all I would have to say, but a lot of the snappiness is on hand in other tunes to kind of reel that back in a bit. Some decent ideas as well. I appreciate the stabbing delivery of Rubber Band's most, I would have to say. Overall though, pretty good and leaves me excited for what's next from him. After that, Panda Eyes, who's had a pretty great last couple of years I would have to say, but in pretty much all respects I think this one feels quite wide of the mark. I appreciate the experimentation here, whether it's more rap influenced, mid-tempo, trap, D&B, different types of dubstep to usual from him. The range of different vocals I think that we get here really works for it as well. But the ideas and execution on pretty much every tune just aren't anywhere near his best by a long, long stretch. A lot of emptiness, a lot of flat delivery, quite jarring at points as well, I would have to say. Interested as to how Part 2 will pick up the project overall, the extent to which it may be similar to Part 1. But yeah, can't say I'm that enthused for it at the moment, I must admit. Following on from there, now everything you like about Peekaboo. Quirky ideas, well cut, sharp definition of sound, off-the-wall delivery, great mix of thrilling and evil as fuck. You get that all here, once again. With a bit of experimentation as well, I think some of it definitely works more. The house tune isn't one I'll be going back to all that much, but mostly very creative and full of life, similar to his past few EPs in that it is just done really well. A lot of it in terms of the combination of idea and execution. Vocal samples are as usual off the chain. Flows are naughty. It just keeps you locked in. And it's further confirmation for me that he is one of the best in bass music at the moment. Certainly in that freeform dub trap crossover. There is really no one better right now. There is no doubt about that. Then we have the new Snails collab project, album, whatever you want to call it. Goes right up there with the Bear Grylls, Riot 10, Sullivan King. Just below the Borgore as one of the most uninspired, weakly produced, offensive albums of the year. Yeah, if you want to call it an album, again, I'm not so sure what you would call it. Just think about the wealth of dubstep talent we have on show here, and how ordinary these ideas are, how rough the production quality is for a lot of it. Just so painfully average. Don't fall into the trap of assuming, or don't be that person who thinks that just because these people have collaborated that it will automatically be good. On that basis, they could get together and make anything and you would enjoy it, which is straight up just not how it should be. How they were happy with these results, I'm really not so sure. Very underwhelming and not something I'll be going back to again. I have to say. Also, like the guy Snails himself can't make a song by himself anymore. I mean, what's going on there? Pretty mad fall from grace, I have to say. And I'd love to give a favourite, I really would, or one that I even remotely enjoy, but I don't think there is one, I'm afraid. After that, we have the new Soraa EP. Really nice dose of acidic, squelchy, hard-hitting rhythm tunes here. No doubt this is what I like his music most for. Proper forceful stuff, a lot of it. The definition of the sound generally, percussion in particular, is pretty on point throughout. Far better than many others of its kind, I would have to say. A real punch to it over the 4 tunes. A little more creativity and invention needed to take him to the next level, but I can't lie, here we have a really solid, chunky EP, and a big recommend from last month. Go check it out and give him a follow. Moving on, the new EP from Sorrow, a burial-like atmosphere here in owing to the producer I talked about at the very beginning of this video. Somewhere between classical and electronic, vocal sampling, evident bits of original dubstep in there as well, hints of Cohen's sound also. So yeah, I think if you haven't heard of Sorrow, this EP will introduce you to his work in a really good way, I think, yeah. An EP that comes across as light and sweet on the surface, but which I find to have a pretty dark, glum, melancholic undertone running through it. I think to tug at the heartstrings of listeners more, it could have been a bit more subtle with percussion, doesn't have to be so sharp, and could have made some of it more muffled, distant, echoey, a la Burial, and some of the musical progressions are a bit wayward and could do with less on that front, but I suppose that's his style, and generally it's a very nice listen, soothing and enduring. So yeah, if that's something that you think you could vibe along with a little bit of heaviness lying underneath, I fully recommend it for you. After that, Stabby. I think last few years have been a bit iffy for him. Experimental, but not really in the right way. Trying things out and posting to SoundCloud, a lot of it not sounding like him in his best form in any way. And I felt like he needed a proper label project release to pick his production back up. And that's what we get here. His music seems formed in a much better way, both on the melodic front and the heaviness front. Not to say I enjoy all of it, in particular, I think track 4 I'm not that big on, but overall, on the whole, this material seems much more together than other stuff from him in the immediate past. Track 3, Dojo, in particular, I think has a lot going on, but never feels like it's going overboard. That kind of control is what I love about his music, while still seeming so wild, if you get me. But yeah, generally, it sounds much more like him, and I think that's what we want. Penultimately, we have the new EP from Super Wet, who had one of my favourite tunes of last year in POD, so I was pretty excited for this project, and in several ways it does continue that good feeling from that original. The ideas are tops, the energy is brilliant, so good as well, I think, for Crow's Nest to have this project on there, and Super Wet generally as a kind of difference from the usual that we get on the collective. Hints of Knife Party in there, but told through super grungy dubstep medium, and if you like your bass music really aggressive, then this will be for you. Production definitely needs refining a bit and ironing out. Cleaner execution on sounds generally and the transitioning between sections, but I think these things will come with time because the foundation is really there. And I do really recommend you check his music out. Start with POD, which I mentioned just before, a brilliant track, and then go from there. And finally, the new album from Vacant, another that I placed in a yearly favourites video, this time the album's one, and says it all again, I think, for how I feel about it, having placed there, with it having been out for not a long time at all. Under a month, I think, and again, if you want some more extensive thoughts from me on that project, then check out my top albums video, which I shall link just here. And so there we have it, guys, the December 2019 edition of the monthly Extra Nawties Roundup. I hope you enjoyed it, the first of the decade. Thank you very much for watching. The honourable mentions from last month, not as many as usual actually this time, but just going to put them up on the screen here for you all to see.
Yep, have a little pause if you want to note them down or take a screenshot or whatever, because they will not be in the description down below. Yeah, the ones in the description are the ones that I talked about. These ones will not be, so yeah, take a screenshot if you wish. But regarding the albums, EPs and compilations reviewed in this video, which ones did you enjoy, which others not so much? Are there any that I missed out? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to give it a big old thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell along the way. My social media accounts are linked in the description box as well, and next to my head there should be a link to another Extra Nawties monthly roundup video if you're looking for some more dark electronic music to explore. And lastly, if it's naughty, then you know guys, so be sure as always to keep it naughty and stay safe, and I shall see all of you legends in the next one. Peace out.